Tim, welcome to Watch You Want and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the IWC Portuguese Tourbillon F.A. Jones reference 544702, 43 millimeters in 18 karat yellow gold. This 2010 commemorative edition honors IWC's founding father F.A. Jones, and it is one of only 50 made in a combination of yellow gold with the tourbillon and the blue dial. Now on the wrist, perhaps the most extraordinary fact of this watch is that it wears no differently than the conventional compact hand-wind Portuguese. Now 43 millimeters, but delightfully only 11 millimeters thick. It sits as flush to the wrist, as broad and as flat as the traditional Portuguese, the original oversized watch. IWC pioneered this look in the late 1930s with the original 325, the so-called Portuguese. Originally conceived by IWC's Portuguese importers as a wristwatch that would house a hyper-accurate pocket watch caliber, that tradition continues here as this tourbillon contains a modified version of one of those ancestral IWC pocket watch calibers, including some elements that date back to the times of F.A. Jones himself. Now you can see, as one of the pioneering large watches, IWC figured out early the key to making a big watch fit on a normal wrist. My wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, wears this watch well because the lugs are nice and short, and you see it to advantage from this angle, but they barely project beyond the 43 millimeter case, and everything that touches the skin is of exquisite quality. It's got just enough heft to feel substantial, but not so much that it becomes oppressive. Like I said, everything that touches the skin of the highest quality. IWC's own clasp with a brushed buckle, polished single deployant in matching 18 karat yellow gold, the case itself with a contrasting finish, brushed on the extremities of the flanks, polished on the tops of the lugs, and polished all the way around about the concave rounded off bezel. You can see that concave tumble home that slopes in and upward from the periphery of the case. Subtle and beautiful, it adds real definition to this large but slim bezel. You can see in classical Portuguese fashion, this one is all dial and all about the dial. The strap is of exceptional quality, rectangular scale black alligator leather on top, a monotone stitch, just enough bolstering to give it a nice shoulder, to give it a nice presence, and then very soft black calfskin on the bottom. A nice broad, flat, regular case back. This one sits comfortably. Now, the highlight of every Portuguese is the dial, and you'll note that if you actually cover up the tourbillon at 9 o'clock, this one reverts to the classical image of the original reference 325, the Portuguese. You can see the classical train track, railroad, or sector chapter ring, the minute track around the periphery of the dial, the applied hour indices and Arabic numerals in matching yellow gold, just like the seconds, minutes, and hour hand. Foy hands at center, just like the original reference, small seconds at 6 o'clock, and a contrasting guilloche cut subdial. All the elements, including the broad spare dial base itself and the IWC Schaffhausen signage, are true to history, true to heritage. Rodriguez and Teixeira, those original importers, would recognize this. But at 9 o'clock, the innovation, slipping out from underneath your shirt cuff in dramatic fashion, the flying tourbillon itself, surrounded by a beautiful matching yellow gold chapter ring. This is the highlight of the watch, and symbolically placed not in the traditional position at either 12 or 6 o'clock, but at 270 degrees, envisioning the watch like a compass, just as F.A. Jones journeyed from his home in Boston to Switzerland, to Schaffhausen, to found IWC in 1868. The original American pilgrim to Switzerland who founded IWC traveled with the prevailing winds from west to east as the trade winds travel. The significance of that is that tourbillon in French means whirlwind, and thus symbolically you have that whirlwind emanating from the west blowing to the east, 270 degrees on the compass, itself a tribute to F.A. Jones and his pioneering journey for IWC. Now the tourbillon cage itself is an exceptional piece of work. Not merely a tourbillon, but a flying tourbillon, so only anchored to the movement on one side. The advantage to this is that the entire tourbillon cage is unobscured and visible through this aperture in the dial. There isn't a separate bridge connecting the watch to the movement on the dial side, so you can see the regulator. You can see the balance. You can see the Breguet overcoil hairspring. You can see the free-sprung index. You can see all the elements of the escapement wheel and the pallet lever. Beautiful, beautifully detailed, with an extensive, almost filigree treatment in as much as the tourbillon cage on the dial side looks really spare, almost like just a collection of wires holding the assembly together. Delicate, airy, ethereal, exactly as a tourbillon should be, and beautifully finished. And while the dial is a highlight of every Portuguese, and the tourbillon makes it all the more so, the bottom line is IWC is a company that takes pride in its engineering traditions. It is a complete manufacturer that makes cases, clasps, movements, and all of the parts of the movements. And in the case of this caliber 98-900, it's not just an IWC in-house movement and in-house tourbillon, but the architecture of the movement is related to the original caliber 98, originating really in the days of F.A. Jones himself. The IWC pocket watch architecture was refined gradually, so that by the 1930s, when the original caliber 98 debuted, it was still tangibly related to the watch movements designed by F.A. Jones himself in the 19th century. And the caliber 98 has been updated through the years with newer refinements, technologies, and it reaches its apogee in this example, the 98-900. Not only has the rate been increased from a stately 18,000 vibrations per hour to 28.8 to ensure utmost precision in the tourbillon movement, but the traditional balance cock has been replaced by a almost wing-like dual-anchored balance bridge in the modern tradition. But despite the increase in beat rate, this watch nevertheless retains 54 hours of autonomy between winding, so you have a robust 54-hour power reserve, and the watch is a pleasure to wind just as it's a pleasure to wear and a pleasure to behold. 21 jewels composed entirely of nickel copper. This is a very traditional movement with a standard of finish that's distinctly above the IWC norm. Now, IWC is a manufacturer of between 70,000 and 75,000 watches per year, has a vast production volume that makes total hand finishing of its volume models not practicable. Now, while it does include hand finish on just about all of its movements, very few are entirely hand finished, and the 98-900 is one of them. Everything from the anglage, which is broad, beautiful, with a distinctly curved radius about the sheer edges of the three-quarter plate, to the tight, even, and intricately overlapping perlage on the broadly visible base plate, the graining of the wheels. This is an entirely hand-finished movement, and to compound the emphasis on the signature tourbillon regulating organ, you can see this unique radiating Côte de Genève, neither circular nor linear. It's almost like the impact of a pebble upon a still body of water or a pond. Radiating outward, the energy of the tourbillon has an impact across the face of the movement, almost as if to symbolize the effect F.A. Jones himself had on Swiss watchmaking, starting with that first act of daring in 1868, radiating out into eternity. It's a beautiful, symbolic, interpretive treatment of the movement. It could essentially mean whatever you want it to mean, but it's beautifully rendered, and, I believe, capped off by that 18-karat yellow gold IWC Schaffhausen medallion in the middle. It's completely unique in the IWC Portuguese continuity. Again, the combination of a Portuguese, the face of IWC, with the tourbillon, the apogee of high horology, IWC's own pocket watch-based movement on an architecture dating back to the ancestral Portuguese days, and even the pioneering days of F.A. Jones himself, one of only 50 made. This IWC Portuguese Tourbillon F.A. Jones, reference 544702, in 18-karat yellow gold, is an exceptional timepiece, exquisite in every way. It represents elegance, it represents enduring style, it represents high horology engineering. And if this isn't the watch you want, check out the imagery on our website, Watch You Want.